Joining us now to discuss the president's efforts to address the affordability crisis that plagues so many Americans is national trial attorney and former Democratic speechwriter Madeline Summerville, along with Colin, founder of South Hill Strategies. It's great to have you both back with us. So we just saw President Trump addressing affordability at the McDonald summit, as it was dubbed. Let's listen to the president on bringing down the cost of living for Americans.
Walmart came up last week and they announced that Thanksgiving this year is 25% less. All of the accoutrements, that Thanksgiving is 25% less than it was last year under Sleepy Joe Biden. So,
Madeline, what do you make of the president's sort of new push and focus on making lowering the costs and easing the affordability strain on the American people?
Yeah, so this is not at all as a partisan, just as an analyst and somebody who studies persuasion and language. I think it's very interesting that he has decided not to use the word affordability. I was watching the speech and I watched him dodge using it multiple times. He would say something like, people are worried about the cost of things or whatever you want to call it. By dodging that word in particular, he's trying to reframe it himself, right? Because he understands that Republicans are losing on that point. And again, this is not as a partisan, this is just as an analyst looking at this. And so I do think that President Trump wants prices to come down, but the fact is that regardless of what this Walmart analysis was, that the price for things like coffee, bananas, meat, is much higher than it was last year. And for that reason, that's why President Trump is rolling back a lot of the tariffs that he's put on recently, especially for things that are made out of the country that we don't have here. So I think it's evidence of the fact that he knows that he's losing this fight. And I'm interested to see what his next move is going to be.
Colin, what do you make of that point? And is it affordability? Is it cost? Is it cost because it's more quantifiable? Or is affordability the best way to be looking at it? And either way, is this something that you think is a good approach for Republicans heading into the midterms to be focusing on?
Well, Steve, it's interesting to hear people talk about the term affordability as though it's a virus that you can either catch or not catch. And it's especially amusing to hear it from the same people who, for the 4 years of the Joe Biden presidency, were pushing insane policies like the Inflation Reduction Act, like the war on domestic American energy that drove prices to generational highs, that drove gas over $5 a gallon, that made things like supply chains and all these crazy terms that no one had ever heard of since the era of Jimmy Carter. Now, fast forward 9 months, they're all of a sudden complaining that costs are too high and prices are too high. It's going to take more time. Donald Trump's a lot of things. He's not a magician. He can't just wave a wand overnight and undo all the catastrophic damage to this country that was inflicted upon his predecessor. Bad policies have bad outcomes on real life people. And affordability is another term of the cost of living. And when you spend all your time punishing businesses, punishing entrepreneurs, and putting in place all these insane regulations, it's going to have downstream effects. The American people are learning that now. The Biden hangover is real. Sure, President Trump's got another year to fix it before the midterms, but these are major, major things that he's still left cleaning up from the Biden-Harris administration.
Pardon me, Steve. I certainly am not here to defend Biden. This is just an analysis of President Trump and what he's decided to do here. Although I really do like the phrase Biden hangover. Regardless, actually, President Trump is saying that things are affordable. He's saying that things are good in the economy, as opposed to what the American people are saying. So I just wanted to point that out as a difference.
Well, look, the polls last week or 2 weeks ago in those three elections we had, it showed that the economics, as it always is voters' number one concern. The party in charge, rightly or wrongly, bears the brunt of that. Right now, the party in charge is the Republican Party. My point is the damage that was done is going to take longer than 9 months to undo. President Trump knows that. And he understands that the policies he's implementing, which will help the private sector, which will help job creators as opposed to just put their foot in their throats, will help people get off the mat. But this idea that any politician, left, right, or center, could just wave a wand and bring prices down, I mean, that's straight out of socialism. And that's what I guess the people of New York City are about to learn in come January when their new mayor takes over.
Now,
that's Trump's claim, not mine.
Now, speaking of socialism and the clash of two polar opposite ideologies when it comes to policy, President Trump signaled that he may soon meet with New York City's mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani, the self-described Democratic socialist. Mamdani says he's already reached out to the White House to, work something out, as he put it. So, Madeline, do you see any potential for collaboration here? And how much funding do you think Mamdani will need from the federal government to fulfill his promises?
That's an interesting question. And here's the thing. So, and I was very pleased to be able to talk with you the night that he was elected and to be with NTD because I love NTD. I think you guys do a wonderful job covering things. But I think the night that he was elected, he demonstrated to me that he's a human rights candidate. And so that being his priority, it makes sense to me that he wouldn't put party over the people. He doesn't care what the Democratic Party wants from him or doesn't want from him. I think if he would have listened to them, then he wouldn't have gotten elected in the first place. He kind of pulled a Trump and started talking about things that people actually cared about rather than what the pundits or, people like me who are talking head were saying at the time. And I think that he can reach out to Trump and talk and make a deal. My favorite thing about President Trump, and I do not support him, is that I do think he wants people to like him. I do think that he wants people to make a deal with him. And I think that is for the sake of people liking him in the country. And that's an okay thing when you're in charge of the people. So I actually hope that they can discuss and that both people can put politics aside in order to make sure that people are properly funded, that New York can succeed.
Well, we greatly appreciated your perspective on that historic night not too long ago. We appreciate a wide range of perspectives, and yours is certainly one of them. Colin, the president has long expressed affection for his home city of New York City, and that he wants it to succeed. How do you think that this will influence his talks with Mamdani, and where do you see them perhaps finding some common ground?
Well, look, I think people expect their elected officials of different political parties to at least have the ability to sit down and talk and meet. So in that sense, it's probably an encouraging thing that that's happening. My bigger concern is for the people of New York City who, by virtue of Zohran Mamdani, sure, he ran an okay campaign and that he at least put forward ideas, crazy ideas, but at least put forward ideas against two guys who put forward no ideas, and Andrew Cuomo and then Eric Adams, who were just utterly irredeemable in the eyes of voters. But now, come January 1, the epicenter of capitalism, the financial center of the free world, is about to be run by a self-avowed socialist. Socialism doesn't work. You do not need an advanced degree in history to understand that. It's failed time and time again. And you cannot just simply take more money away from people and businesses, tax them back to the Stone Age, and expect that things are going to turn around. The top income tax right now for the people of New York City is 14%. That's the state and city tax. Zohran Mamdani wants to make it even higher. People are going to vote with their feet. They're going to flee for other higher places like Connecticut, New York, and elsewhere. I guess it's a boon to red states where businesses are going to want to go because they can afford to actually try and do what they want to do. But I take no pleasure in seeing New York City just fall into the hands of this guy. I hope he doesn't do all that. I hope common sense prevails, but we've seen nothing in his transition that would indicate that's so. He's appointed Lena Khan, the former FTC chair under President Biden, one of the chief architects of Bidenomics, to a key position. He's appointed Jamal Bowman is in the running to take over the school system. This was a guy who, your viewers may remember, pulled the fire alarm in the House of Representatives rather than debate. He was thrown out of office, disgraced. Is a former member of the squad. These are not the people you want to be running America's largest city, nor the center of capitalism.
We're going to have to wait and see how it all pans out. We're going to bring it back here to D.C. For the last question. The Supreme Court set to review a policy that had let officials limit asylum claims during border surges. President Biden later rescinded that policy, which was then formalized in Trump's first term, but began under Obama. Madeline, why did President Biden rescind it? And given the recent volume of border crossings, is it reasonable to consider bringing some form of it back?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting question. And I have a friend who I call the Scalia to my RBG because he's my super conservative friend that keeps me in check. This is sort of the remain in Mexico policy, right? So it's people who were already in the United States who said, or who were on the border, right? And particularly in this case, it's on the Mexico border, saying we need asylum, right? We have a particular specific reason that your government has made its laws structured to be able to cater to us, right? Because we wanted this to be a place of freedom. I'm coming here for freedom. The issue here is that when the Biden administration was in power, they weren't vetting everyone that was coming in. And I don't know how that happened, but it happened. And Democrats would do well to admit that. But what happened is, right, we had a big influx of people that we didn't know what was going on. And now, as you've said, there are no people, right, or very, very few that are coming in. So what the Supreme Court is evaluating now is whether or not people who are already here or who are on the border have to remain in Mexico while their asylum claims are being evaluated if they are in danger. And so it'll be really interesting to see how this is going to turn out. And I do think that it's a reflection upon what people value in terms of human rights too, that this is being discussed. I think that we're trying to find a balance here, right? We can't let everyone in without vetting, but we also don't want to keep people who have legitimate asylum claims out. So I think this is a really important case for the Supreme Court, and I hope that they have a very nuanced approach to it.
Colin, this is such a complicated issue because on the one hand, there's no question that our asylum process has been abused, but on the other, that process is the cornerstone, sort of the foundation, the bedrock of everything our country stands for. How do we navigate this?
Well, Steve, you hit the nail on your head in the way you framed the previous question, which is why did President Biden in June of 2024 go back and essentially bring the asylum numbers down to zero? The answer, of course, is politics, because he at the time was trying to run for re-election. This is prior to the debate that ended his political career. And he saw that immigration become this political liability because there was record numbers of people streaming across the border. And the American people said, this is unacceptable. And we've gone from that, where you had record high numbers, no one having any clue who was coming into this country, and all the concerns that brings, to having just in 9 short months, almost zero people coming down to the border. Now, the question is, how is President Trump and others going to be able to sustain that going forward into the next term? So all of this it doesn't just become a political back and forth. At some point, there's going to be some sort of legislative package that addresses the longer term issues of that. In this polarized political climate where members of Congress can barely keep the lights on, they can't keep the lights on, frankly. It took 43 days of a government shutdown for us to learn that. It seems unlikely. But right now, like with so many other things, immigration cannot just be swinging back and forth like a yo-yo on the whims of whatever party's in charge. That said, the American people do agree with President Trump. It's always been one of his strongest issues, immigration, and that's in large part because of just the catastrophic failures of President Biden and his inability to bring any sort of semblance of order to the southern border.
And at some
Madeline,
point, we'll have to
Colin,
stop focusing on what President Biden did and just focus on what President Trump is doing now.
And we have to leave it there.
That's right. But
Madeline, Summerville.
You can't wave a wand and turn around an ocean liner overnight. You just can't do it. Steve, thanks for having us.
Colin Reed, thank you.